If we can limit our comments to 3 minutes, and again, there's this little button on the table there. Just press that button when you begin and then turn it off when you end. Go ahead, Ms. Gardner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership on communications. Windstream started in 1948 as a local phone company in Sheraton, Arkansas. Sheraton is typical of the areas we serve, which include some of the most remote areas in the nation. In markets like Little Rock, Windstream is a competitive carrier, going head-to-head with the largest incumbent phone companies, as well as incumbent cable companies. Linking our urban and rural markets is the Windstream network and associated infrastructure, including more than 20 data centers that support cloud-based storage services. Our network includes 115,000 miles of fiber optic cable, enough to circle the Earth 4.5 times. Education institutions are important Windstream customers. For example, we deliver 1 gigabit service to both North Little Rock high schools. Windstream understands the potential of replicating this service elsewhere. Governor Beebe has formed a state task force to examine our needs as a state, and I'm a member of that task force. In rural Arkansas, the 2009 Recovery Act is funding broadband upgrades to about 13,000 of our customers, but thousands more continue to wait year after year for broadband. The FCC's new Connect America Fund is a work in progress but should help. Fortunately, CAF will begin investing in Arkansas in 2013. Both you and Commissioner Rosenworcel deserve great credit for accelerating the effort. Thank you for that. Today, as a part of CAF, Windstream is announcing plans for substantial rural investments, and this includes a significant incremental investment in this state. Windstream also serves small, medium, and large businesses in urban markets. In Little Rock, for instance, Windstream connects some of the largest medical facilities. Last year, we opened a state-of-the-art data center in West Little Rock. Especially for competitive providers, it is vital that Congress and the FCC proceed with care in remaking regulatory structures for the IP era. Some have called for a sweeping rollback of the powers of the FCC, but telecom is complex. There are risks of competitive harm, unbalanced regulatory treatment among competing platforms may disincent investment. Reforms must be judicious and fact-based. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening today's dialogue. We all need a practical understanding of the state's communication needs and challenges. Thank you.
Mr. Grilling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and with the Commissioner as well. Thank you for being here. Certainly, access to broadband technologies has fundamentally changed society, the way we live, the way we work, the way we connect. AT&T, we've had to fundamentally change the way we build and manage our network to keep up and stay ahead of this demand. You know, I can relate a story here just about Arkansas, Senator, where in 2000, when I first came in the job as president of AT&T Arkansas, we had over a million access lines, 1,033,000 actually, 333,000 access lines in Arkansas. And as of July of this year, that number is now 361,000 access lines. So that's a drop of 65% of our access lines over that period of time. If somebody would have told me that in 2000, I would have been concerned that I would have either been fired by now or our company would be broke or both. But obviously we've had to make an extreme pivot in the way we manage and build our networks. That decrease is even more significant when you look at just the consumer access lines, which have dropped 75%. So as of July, when you overlay the increase in living units that we've got in our traditional landline footprint, about 17% of the living units that are in our footprint have landline telephone service. So we see a high penetration of wireless in Arkansas. Over 50% of our customers have wireless only. A large number have gone to cable and VoIP. A very competitive marketplace out there. But we have pivoted and we have invested heavily in Arkansas. Just in the last 4 years alone, through July, we have invested over $840 million, $90 million of that just in the last 6 months of this year. We've invested heavily in LTE wireless technology. By mid-2014, we will see all of our towers LTE equipped and providing wireless broadband across the state, and increasing the number of sites that we have in rural areas as well. We also have invested heavily in UVerse and other IP technologies across the state. So what this means also is that we are taking fiber deeper and deeper into our network, deeper into rural areas where we can more cost-effectively serve small businesses, healthcare institutions, educational institutions around the state as well. Of course, it requires more bandwidth and it requires more spectrum from a wireless perspective as well. I think the challenge that we have going forward, because we know what we've seen in the last 6 years, we know what's going to happen going forward in the next 6 years is going to be even more dramatic and require even more bandwidth. But we also have the legacy network that we continue to have to invest in and keep up with, even though we're losing customers on that network in droves. So the Commissioner mentioned the IP transition a few minutes ago in her remarks, and we sure look forward to working with you and the Commission on this transition as we go forward over the next several years.
Thank you. Mr. Strode.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify today. Companies such as Ritter Communications and its subsidiaries are state-of-the-art broadband companies providing for our customers varied data, video, and voice needs. We connect the state, the nation, and the world while holding the responsibilities of consumer protection, public safety, equitable competition, and universal service in the highest regard. Despite our contributions, rural telecommunications companies face greater challenges than ever, as the mechanisms for ensuring high-cost areas stay connected are called into question. Many in the rural telecom industry continue to struggle with the FCC's Universal Service Fund and Near-Carrier Compensation Transformation Order. The order's cuts, together with the threat of more to come, inject substantial regulatory uncertainty into the operations of our companies. In fact, even companies that are not affected by the cuts at this point are deciding against network upgrades for fear of becoming the next to be capped. Thanks to your efforts and those of your colleagues, there has been some incremental progress toward eliminating the uncertainty and building a broadband future through more sensible modifications to the relevant programs. But this work isn't done, and we need a targeted Connect America Fund for small carriers that supports access to sustainable, affordable broadband. This is part of a larger debate about technology transitions in the telecom sector. We need a thoughtful evaluation of whether existing rules should be modified or eliminated as technologies evolve. However, it must not disregard key public policy cornerstones, including universal service and consumer protection. The epidemic of rural call completion failures provides the best early indication of what can happen without sensible rules of the road to ensure core public policy goals are served. Likewise, as our nation undertakes new initiatives like FirstNet and modernizing the E-rate program, it is important to be thoughtful in structuring and developing such programs. We should be leveraging existing networks and coordinating such initiatives with other programs like the high-cost USF to avoid wasting valuable resources and program dollars. Finally, we hope policymakers will update the rules governing the video and wireless marketplaces to ensure consumers are served and fair competition is enabled. In particular, the broken retransmission consent market, exemplified by the current CBS Time Warner dispute, is governed by outdated rules that no longer reflect today's marketplace. We are aware that the Senate Commerce Committee must renew the Satellite Television Extension and Localism Act by the end of 2014. As chairman of the relevant subcommittee, we hope you will keep an open mind regarding whether modernizing retransmission consent rules should be considered as part of that bill's reauthorization. In closing, adopting and updating sensible rules of the road that create regulatory certainty and help build a broadband future for rural Arkansas will be essential to the success of our customers and our companies. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Mr. Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to you today. And just to prepare you for a boy that takes 2 syllables to say 1-syllable words, 3 minutes might not make it. So, CenturyLink offers communication services to 14 million homes and businesses in all 50 states and select international markets. Our services include broadband, voice, video entertainment and data, as well as fiber backhaul, cloud computing, and managed security solutions. From our roots in Oak Ridge, Louisiana, our company has evolved over the years through innovation and significant capital investment, and we're especially proud of what has gone on here in Arkansas. In 2000, CenturyLink expanded our operations in Arkansas and became the second largest telecommunications provider in the state when we purchased 230,000 access lines from GTE. At the time of the purchase, broadband availability over that network was minimal. Since that time, CenturyLink has invested over $1 billion to upgrade, expand, and maintain our Arkansas network, and we now make broadband access available to 92% of our Arkansas customers. We have followed a similar pattern of investment across our national network, bringing broadband infrastructure to many rural communities that would otherwise be left behind. Nationally, 83% of the areas we serve contain 10 or fewer customers per square mile. But we have so far brought broadband access to more than 90% of our customers. While we have overcome many obstacles, serving low-density rural markets will always be a challenge as networks evolve with a higher investment requirement for each customer. CenturyLink has also sought to eliminate barriers to broadband adoption through our Internet Basics program. For low-income customers in our service areas who qualify for the FCC's Lifeline telephone program, CenturyLink also offers broadband service for $9.95 per month with a netbook computer for $150. We have conducted numerous training sessions across the country to educate current and potential customers about the basics of digital literacy so they can connect to distance learning, telemedicine, and small business opportunities. Since the creation of this program, CenturyLink has signed up over 30,000 new low-income customers, and the growth of that program is accelerating. Looking to the future, no communications company can afford to stand still. In 2011, we acquired a leading cloud computing company, Savvis, and have combined their award-winning cloud services with our backbone to help make government and business customers more efficient and effective. We have also expanded our IPTV services, offering consumers another direct competitor to cable and satellite TV. We've connected over 16,000 towers to the fiber network for 4G wireless. We've also grown our cybersecurity services, and we are preparing for the transition to an all-IP network. There are many corners of low-density population and challenging terrain where market forces alone will never put customers on a level playing field in the digital economy. Mr. Chairman, your leadership has been tremendously valuable in encouraging the FCC to proceed with reforms to its rural broadband policy and can bring targeted support to those areas in partnership with rural broadband providers. We also appreciate your thoughtful consideration of cybersecurity issues, Stella, and we look forward to working with the committee on all these issues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Senator Pryor, for allowing me to be on the panel today. My name is Greg Ashcraft. I am CFO for South Arkansas Telephone Company. South Arkansas Telephone Company is an independent local exchange carrier in Hampton. We have 2,800 telephone customers and 1,100 broadband customers. Today, I'd just like to go over a few of the challenges the telephone companies are facing today. The first challenge, which Mr. Drilling has already touched on, is the loss of customers, and it's not large and small, it's nationwide. Their percent was pretty high, but for instance, South Arkansas Telephone Company in 1999 had 4,400 telephone customers. Today we've got 2,800, so that's a loss of 36%. So it's a nationwide problem, and it's a major challenge. The next challenge is the uncertainty of the revenue streams, which Mr. Strode has touched on too. The loss of customers causes a loss of local service revenue, a loss of toll revenue, and also a loss of access revenue. But then in 2013, there were 2 plans that were implemented. It also puts more pressure on revenue streams. One was we had to lower our intrastate access rates down to the interstate access rates level, which caused a revenue reduction. Another plan was implemented that they will start doing a regression analysis on the Universal Service Fund each year. And the regression analysis is they look at what all the telephone companies in the country are spending and compare that to what your company is spending on investment and expenses. And if you're in the 10% of that analysis, your revenue, your Universal Service revenue is decreased. There's no benchmark level of what the regression analysis amounts are, so it's very difficult for the companies to forecast what their Universal Service revenues will be. That hampers investments in broadband, so it's kind of hard to gauge. So that's a challenge. Another challenge is meeting the broadband demands and the changing technologies. As you know, broadband has changed a lot in the last 10 years. When South Arkansas Telephone Company first started offering internet, it was dial-up at 256K speed, and we carried all the traffic on 1 T1. Now, today, the minimum speed we offer is 6 meg, and we carry the traffic on 1 gig. So we think we've done a very good job of meeting that challenge, but meeting that challenge has a very big price tag on it. So in order to offer those kinds of speeds, we've had to make capital improvements in our plant to add more remotes and put more fiber in the ground. So that's just a few of the challenges that the companies are facing today, and they will continue to face them in the future. Thank you again.
Thank you. A few moments ago, I said Dean Taylor. Of course, everybody understood I meant David Russell. Dean Taylor couldn't be here with us. David, we're delighted to have you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Pryor, Commissioner Rosenworcel, and fellow panelists and ladies and gentlemen. I am David Russell. I'm Vice President of External Affairs for Verizon South area, representing Dean, who sends his regrets. I'm pleased to be able to report that Verizon has invested significantly in Arkansas in terms of advancing its network, employment, and community support. We were the first wireless carrier to bring 4G LTE technology to Arkansas. I need to note here that 4G and 4G LTE are different technologies. LTE stands for long-term evolution, and it's a new technology and is viewed industry-wide as the global standard, the future of wireless technology. The big difference to the consumer center is it's a lot faster. Verizon launched this service in several cities in northwest Arkansas in July of 2011. We were the only provider of this technology in Arkansas for about the next year. We continued our aggressive rollout of this technology across Arkansas and announced the substantial completion of our LTE coverage across the state just 2 months ago. Verizon Wireless Network covers almost 97% of Arkansas's population, and year-to-date, more than 99% of that network is also covered by our 4G LTE network. This network is beneficial to consumers because its speed allows them real-time experience when they're mobile. They can upload, download, use the internet, watch videos, all at similar speeds as if they were connected by a copper landline. Verizon's network is continuously recognized by J.D. Power, Root Metrics, and other third parties as the most reliable in the country, and we continue to prove that reliability to our customers in Arkansas and across the nation. On average, Verizon annually invests more than $6 billion in our network across the country. This year in Arkansas, we will invest $100 million in our wireless network to reinforce that reliability and redundancy. So what does it mean for business and government? Well, in business, it means that companies in any industry can be mobile. They can monitor their fleet vehicles in real time. First responders can provide doctors with live video triage while a patient is en route to a hospital. Police officers can access any department or state data they need from their units and file reports from the scene. As schools integrate new technology like digital tablets in the classroom, teachers rely on the connectivity and speed of LTE technology to support a child's learning experience and keep them connected. Just last week, I was up in North Arkansas to present the Cotter School District, which is in a very rural part of the state, with a Verizon Foundation grant for $50,000 that will support 300 students in adapting broadband technologies to enhance science, technology, engineering, and math education. Now, Cotter is very rural, but these kids are not missing an opportunity to learn because they're using our LTE technology to stay connected. Verizon employs a diverse workforce across Arkansas, mostly in sales, but in a number of other fields. For example, Little Rock is home to a customer service center that will be hiring several hundred new positions this year, and we're hiring employees in other professional positions as well. Verizon is a Fortune 16 company that's a good corporate citizen in Arkansas, bringing new and reliable technology to the state, supporting businesses large and small, and enhancing the economy. Senator Pryor, we appreciate your continued leadership on many important issues in our industry, including your co-sponsorship of an amendment earlier this year that would have extended the moratorium on taxation of the internet. Thank you very much. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles.
There it goes. I hit it twice. Thank you, Chairman, Commissioner. Thank you for having me. I'm Elizabeth Bowles. I'm President and Chairman of the Board of Aristotle, Inc. We are a fixed wireless broadband provider and interactive media agency headquartered here in Little Rock. Additionally, I'm the immediate past president of the Fixed Wireless Trade Association, Wireless Internet Service Provider Association, also called WISPA. The FCC found that 76% of those without broadband live in rural America, and Arkansas is a rural state. But more than that, we're a rural state with mountains and granite and topographical challenges that can make deployment of wireline solutions difficult and expensive. Although it's often overlooked, fixed wireless broadband can solve the challenges of delivering broadband to many of these rural areas, and WISPs like Aristotle are doing that now, primarily through the use of unlicensed and licensed light spectrum. Fixed wireless broadband is as reliable as wireline solutions, is capable of the same speeds, and is far less expensive to deploy. For example, Aristotle only needs between 40 and 120 customers to justify moving into an area. The cost of fixed wireless deployment is fractional compared to the cost of deploying fiber. And even if fiber is the ultimate goal, fixed wireless is far quicker to deploy. Aristotle can deploy a tower in less than a week, and fixed wireless can serve as the last mile delivery mechanism while fiber is being trenched, so nobody has to wait for fiber. And fixed wireless broadband can and should serve as a backup for wireline solutions to ensure that broadband connectivity is not lost. We heard earlier about a fiber cut. That type of thing can be resolved by a backup fixed wireless solution. When we look at broadband deployment as a policy matter, it is critical that we create a blended solution that takes into account fixed wireless broadband. Unlicensed spectrum is crucial to that, and a balanced policy that makes room for both licensed and unlicensed spectrum uses is the only responsible path. Licensed spectrum is important, but so is unlicensed. And in addition to balancing licensed versus unlicensed uses, the FCC should also balance the needs of urban areas with those of non-urban areas. The cellular congestion that's always in the news is a real problem in Manhattan. It's not that much of a problem in Malvern. The FCC can and should make different sets of rules for urban and non-urban areas. For example, in 5 gigahertz, the FCC could prioritize small cells in urban areas while allowing priority for higher power uses in rural areas. In other words, just because a policy is perfect for a high-density market does not make it good policy for every market, and we should ensure that any policies are balanced. We all agree that every rural Arkansan and every rural American deserves the same access to broadband as somebody in Dallas. The only way to accomplish this is through a balanced spectrum solution that not only protects the availability of usable unlicensed spectrum, that also makes additional spectrum available for both unlicensed and licensed light uses. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stephen Sanders, and I'm the General Manager of Northern Arkansas Telephone Company. NATCO is an independent local exchange carrier currently employing 43 people that was founded in 1951 by my grandfather. It presently serves about 5,000 access lines in 6 Northern Arkansas exchanges in Marion and Boone counties. Companies like NATCO face a formidable task, building communications networks in areas where there often isn't a business case for doing so because of sparse population and rugged terrain. Thanks to the efforts of Senator Pryor and others, NATCO in 2010 received a Broadband Initiative Program grant loan from the Rural Utilities Service that will soon enable us to provide fiber-to-the-home broadband services at initial speeds of 20 to 50 megabits per second to customers in our Diamond City exchange. NATCO also upgraded about half of its Bull Shoals exchange during 2009 and 2010 with fiber-to-the-home facilities, but suspended that project in December 2011 due to the uncertainties arising from the FCC's November 2011 USF ICC order. Many of the reforms to the Universal Service Fund and Inter-Carrier Compensation Regime initiated by the FCC in 2011 order have caused rural ILECs to think twice about making further investments in their networks. The federal USF program has had remarkable success in enabling over 95% of U.S. households to connect to the public voice network and in beginning the transition to a public broadband network. However, the nation will not be well served if its rural residents have access to only 4 megabits per second download and 1 megabit per second upload speed supported by the FCC in rural areas, while their urban counterparts can obtain 100 megabits or better in both directions that are being supported by the FCC in urban America. This will have an effect which deprives them of the use of many business, educational, medical, and entertainment applications available to urban residents. This is the worst sort of digital divide and will deny rural families of the opportunity to participate fully and fairly in the economic and social life of the nation. The quantile regression analysis model is a case in point where the FCC has created unpredictability and uncertainty that has brought broadband investment by rural ILECs to a virtual halt. If NATCO builds a fiber project in 2014, it will not begin to receive any USF support to help recover the cost until 2016. And then the amount it receives will be subject to potential decreases each year due to the operation of the QRA, which calculates annual USF support each year on the basis of coefficients determined by the investment and operating costs of hundreds of other rural ILECs, of which I have no knowledge. The end result is that I cannot assure lenders that NATCO can recover the costs of potential infrastructure projects. In conclusion, broadband has incredible benefits to offer all Arkansans, but it's the rural economy, the one that's most geographically isolated, that stands to gain the most from the way that broadband shrinks the distance between users. NATCO and others like it are committed to serving our communities. There's an opportunity here for federal policymakers to assist us in building the networks of the future, and that is by making sure policies are in place to adhere to the principles and provisions of the Communications Act. Thank you.
Thank you. We've covered a lot of ground here. I want to dive in first, if I may, with Eddie Drilling. Mr. Drilling and I first met way long time ago when he was with Southwestern Bell Telephone. And he really has had a front row seat to so many changes, like many of you had, but he's had a front row seat to so many changes in the industry. And I'd like to, let me start, if I may, Eddie, with you on the IP transition. That's just one of the many aspects, one of the many changes that's coming around. First, could you explain to the subcommittee kind of what I mean by IP transition? Secondly, if you could give us an update in terms of where your company is, because I'd like to hear from all the companies on where they are on IP transition.
So this years and years of front row seats, basically you're just telling me I'm old.
Yes.
What you're kind of getting around to.
Me too.
I
Both of
appreciate
us.
that, Senator. Thank you. Well, you know, I guess the IP transition means something a little bit different to different people, different companies. But, you know, basically what I was explaining in my remarks is that this is taking place before our very eyes. You know, the fact that we have customers that are leaving our traditional TDM switch network at the rate that they are leaving it and either going with a wireless only solution, an IP solution, VoIP, voice over internet protocol, cable, who's providing service, you know, over VoIP. It's a very competitive environment. So this transition away from traditional landline type services to an IP solution is what we're talking about. And you know, you would think, in our case, I mentioned that, you know, we were down to like 17% of our residential living units actually having a traditional landline TDM type service. And you would think that that would start to level off. But in fact, what we're seeing even this year is that the rate of people moving away from the traditional service is even accelerating. So, you know, we're obviously still investing to try to keep up, maintaining and keep up with what traffic there is on our old network, but it presents its challenges because we obviously see the majority of our customers going in a different direction, wanting higher speeds of bandwidth. They want, in many cases, more extensive wireless coverage and LTE coverage, which we're accommodating. And I think, you know, what we are also seeing, you know, 6 years ago, we didn't know what an app was. that wasn't even in our vocabulary. And now there are millions of them, and millions being created every day. Most of the world now is carrying around a smartphone. Basically 100%, over 100% of the people are carrying a wireless device. That's how their connectivity is coming to them. We're seeing more and more wireless data being consumed. So this transition to how people are communicating, the IP networks that are carrying all this traffic, we've seen just in the last 5 years that increased by 30,000% over our network. And Arkansas is no different than any other state, even though we are more rural. We consume a lot of wireless data. So the demand is there, and I think we're going to see over the next 6 years that continue to go up exponentially. Video is going to drive a lot of this. The applications and the educational opportunities, the healthcare opportunities, agriculture, all these are going to be much more video-centric, and that's going to drive a lot more need for IP connectivity, bandwidth, spectrum, in order to accommodate that.
Good. And the other thing that's changed considerably over the years is your competitors, right? You have more.
We've had a front row seat to that too. Very, very much so.
And it's nice that
they're all around me here.
Yeah, it's nice that they're all sitting here, all calm, and everybody's nice to each other. Because in the marketplace, you're in there beating each other's brains in, right?
Yeah, I love these guys. It was good to be a monopoly. No, but it is a very, very competitive model, and I would say that in our case as well, we have 110 wire centers or towns that we serve in Arkansas. Half of those have living units of under 2,500 people, or 2,500 living units. So we serve a whole lot of rural territory as well, and we still see these dynamics in that marketplace as well.
Yeah. So if I can, Mr. Gardner, let me ask you some of those same questions about where you are, where your company is on IP transition. Mr. Drilling mentioned the data usage and how that's just seems to go up, seems like every year exponentially. So tell us where you are and how you're meeting some of these challenges.
Thank you. I think Mr. Drilling did a great job of describing what's going on the residential side. There is a great deal of change, and we've seen that as well. At Windstream, we've really made a ton of investments on the enterprise side, and are really converting our network very quickly to IP as well, adding soft switches, building fiber to the tower for companies like Verizon and AT&T. So it's happening every day. We're seeing very similar things. I would say that we are a bit unique in that we're a competitive access provider as well in many states, and some large markets as well, and here in Little Rock. And in those markets, we're competing with AT&T, Verizon, some of the cable companies as well. And I think it's a little bit different on the business side. And so as we think about the IP transition, I think that we've got to think about those different models. It's not quite the same as on the residential side. There aren't as many choices for businesses, and competitive access providers like Windstream provide a unique option in the marketplace for competitors. And oftentimes when we sell to a customer, we need to rely on a connection with AT&T or Verizon to reach that customer as part of our solution. And so something that we're very, very focused on. And the other thing that I think as we think through that's really challenging in our market, because we do have some huge companies, some mid-sized companies and some small companies, we're all on different paths. And I think as we think through these IP transition solutions, we've just got to be aware of the fact that companies are on different migration paths. We want the system to all work together so that customers at the end of the day are best served. So absolutely agree that something needs to change. It's critically important. For us to serve our customers, we've got to convert our networks very quickly to IP, and I think the regulatory change to support it is critical. And again, I think that when you think about it, just think about business a little bit differently than you do on the residential side.
Okay. Mr. Strode, did you have anything to add on IP transition and data usage, et cetera? And by the way, how many customers do you have, just so we'll know?
Roughly 10,000 voice customers, 16,000 video customers, high-speed internet customers probably in the 12,000 range in Arkansas. We provide an IP-based voice service over our hybrid fiber coax cable network, where we're the primary video provider in those areas. We are looking at how we can transition our traditional ILEC territories to an IP-based service, and certainly our transmission between exchanges and to the outside world. Some of that has already transitioned to IP-based services. Just anecdotally, and I certainly don't say this to be critical of AT&T, I was, as you commented, as Mr. Adroni said, his competitors are here. I looked around this panel, and Ritter Communications partners with, works with, provides wholesale services to every company on this panel, I think, except Aristotle. But we're also competing with everybody on this side of the table, and certainly to some extent our services compete with wireless services provided by Verizon, although we provide wholesale transport services to Verizon. So it's an interesting ecosystem that we're in. My father-in-law has a defibrillator implanted in his chest, has a device on his nightstand that every night takes readings remotely from that defibrillator. A couple years ago, he lives here in Little Rock. He's a customer of AT&T. He decided to switch to UVerse services, and that was great. They were really looking forward to the service they were going to get there. And after they made that transition, found that the device that reads his defibrillator every night is not compatible with the service that AT&T was providing. And so he had to go back, and they maintained their UVerse service, but they also subscribed to an analog line to their house to connect just to that device. So there's some work that needs to be done in the industry, in the medical device industry, to make those devices where they'll be compatible with the new technologies as well. And I think that is a good example of some of the things I talked about in my testimony in terms of needing reasonable rules of the road to make these transitions that consider all of the implications and ramifications of those changes.
Do you have any comments on IP transition and data usage?
Just quickly, everything's pretty much been said. Obviously, as Mr. Gardner said, enterprise and government are driving a lot of that for us. We also offer our own IPTV product. And once again, as you see challenge, every company's kind of taking a different path with their direction. CenturyLink does not have a wireless company. So AT&T and Verizon are looking at it one way. Windstream's got a competitive access provider looking at another way. We'll be looking at it another way. So we're going through the thoughts right now. It's not, it's being driven pretty fast, but it's will probably take a 5 to 10 year period to get there for CenturyLink. And we look forward to working with everybody, but everybody has a little different look and view of how we're going.
Mr. Ashcraft, I'm curious about your company in terms of, are you trying to do an IP transition there?
We've got a VoIP product that we offer. A few customers are on it. We know that probably people are migrating using other products because our access is decreasing, so we know they're utilizing some products, but we do offer that product.
And Mr. Sanders, you have that same, you do IP, right?
We do. We have invested in a soft switch, and our remote carrier systems are IP-based. And I think NADCO and a lot of small companies through the country have invested in that type of equipment. I guess the thing that I would say is that, there's a lot of efficiencies that you can gain by using IP technology, but it's a situation where we would like to proceed with caution, because the service that we can provide our customers in our network is dependent on the services that are offered to us from other companies and the connectivity that we have from other companies. The country has done a good job in building a network for voice communications, and we don't want to see anything fall apart, so to speak, when you transition to IP. And I know that the committee and the FCC is somewhat familiar with call termination issues, which to rural companies like ours are often VoIP related, and whether it's intentional or unintentional, those VoIP issues do affect our customers.
I want to follow up on that in just a minute, but first, Mr. Russell, did you want to talk about IP?
Well, Senator, I joined the communications industry in 1982, and I remember that at that time, the innovations that were introduced that were remarkable in the marketplace was harvest gold and avocado green as colors of phones you could have in your home, as opposed to the basic black. And of course, the phones did have dials. So the transformation has been remarkable in that my company was a regulated monopoly at that time as well. I think what you hear from us is, like these other companies, we see this transformation happening toward IP and cloud-based services. And the reason that we've been so aggressive with the implementation of this long-term evolution technology in our wireless network has been to provide the faster download speeds. Average download is 10 to 12 megabits on this technology, which is very competitive with cable modem or DSL services, because we know that that's where the IP and the cloud-based services are where so many industries are moving, because it allows people to be more productive and more cost-effective.
Yeah. Ms. Bowles, did you have anything to add?
Yes, we are, of course, a company that everything we do is already IP-based, and so we view this as a huge market opportunity. And one of the things that our company is doing is we're looking at starting to offer voice-over IP services and some other IP-based services. So coming at it from the other side, we view this as a really promising development from our competitive perspective, ability to offer phone service and other product lines that we don't currently offer.
Yeah, great. Mr. Sanders, let me follow up. Oh, go ahead.
Could I just add one more thing, Senator? In response to Mr. Strode's comments, I think when we look at this transition and all of the different products and issues that are out there, certainly, home monitoring, health monitoring, those kind of things, I think that kind of points to what I know the Commissioner is very familiar with. There's been a lot of discussion about having a trial to kind of work through some of these issues. And I think that just points out the urgency and the need for us to kind of go through this and work through some of these issues. Certainly not our intent by any means to leave someone without a heart monitoring situation. I think the technology can keep up, and we can implement that in a way that even makes this service and those kinds of technologies better, more portable. And I think that those can be worked out, but I just think it points out the urgency of moving forward with the trial so we can work through a lot of the questions that we may not have answers for right now, but we want to work on getting those answers.
Great. Mr. Sanders, let me follow up with you, something you mentioned a moment ago about call completion. And I assume that Mr. Ashcraft is having this problem, and I know that Mr. Strode has had it because we've talked about it before. But tell the subcommittee and the group here what you mean by, the problem with call completion and it be related to VoIP.
Well, certain carriers, and we don't always know who they are, they use least cost routing formulas to try to route calls in the most inexpensive way that they can. And so as a result, sometimes in rural areas where it takes a longer path to get to the end customer, sometimes those calls don't come through. And it's, like I say, it could be intentional or not intentional or a result of the technology, but often we don't know about those calls when they happen, and so it's a little difficult for us to track down what happened, because typically when the call comes into us, we don't have any record of it. If it does, we don't have a record of it if it doesn't make it into us. So we have to rely on our upstream long distance providers to help us with that if we hear from a customer who has reported the problem.
And so for the customer, what happens is they place a phone call and it just rings and rings and rings, or what does it do?
Yes, I think that that's what happens on the other side.
And you just don't ever, you really don't know unless you get a complaint or something.
Right, our switch doesn't ever see the call, we don't have a chance to deliver it, and our customer doesn't know that they were trying to be called unless somewhere down the line they talk to that person and they say, oh, we had tried to call you a long time.
And what's the connection to voice over IP?
Many of the long-distance companies convert the voice to IP or are using IP, and so they have routers that are set up that start handing the calls off to try to find the most inexpensive way to route it, and at some point the router either drops the call or decides not to continue trying to complete the call.
Have you had that problem, Mr. Ashcraft? And Mr. Strode, I think you've had that problem as well. And there's FCC has released a notice of proposed rulemaking on this with level 3 communications. I guess there's a consent decree. And Mr. Strode, from your standpoint, are those the right steps? Does that fix the problem? Tell me how you think this is going.
It's a step in the right direction. I think it's until we can identify where all the problems are, it's hard to know what all the solutions are, certainly. But it's a step in the right direction. Of course, we would love to see everything move as quickly as possible. Certainly, our customers would like the problems to be fixed. It's hard to explain to our customers what is going on, what causes those issues. We appreciate your leadership on the resolution that was recently reported out of the full Commerce Committee, and look forward to that being passed by the full Senate as well.
Yeah, thank you. We just passed that. Ms. Rosenworcel, did you want to have a comment on any of that you just heard?
Well, first things first, if you're calling a relative in a rural area and your call just never goes through, that's not acceptable. And if you're trying to reach a business in a rural area and your call doesn't go through, that's a lost order. It's also not acceptable if you're trying to reach emergency help in a rural area and that call never goes through. So this is a problem I think the FCC has to take action on. We've set up a task force, we've issued a declaratory ruling, and now we have this rulemaking that Senator Pryor discussed. I think the good thing about that rulemaking is it proposes new record-keeping requirements. And those record-keeping requirements will help the agency go after the bad actors that do not connect these phone calls. And it's my hope I can go back to Washington and convince my colleagues that we should take action on that soon, because this is a problem that I think we can resolve, and I think it needs resolving.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles, let me ask you a question. Based on your testimony, you talked about unlicensed spectrum, licensed and unlicensed spectrum. You mentioned how important unlicensed spectrum is. Could you tell the subcommittee and everybody else here what you mean by that? I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the term unlicensed spectrum.
Sure. Licensed spectrum is spectrum that's allocated for specific uses and specific people. Unlicensed spectrum is open for anyone to use who has equipment that'll work on it. One example of that is 900 megahertz spectrum, and you have running on that spectrum the wireless phones in your house, the cordless phones, the baby monitors, as well as fixed wireless broadband. And a number of fixed wireless providers around the country use 900 predominantly. You recently had a ruling out of the FCC that Progeny is going to use that 900 for some first responder networks that they're running in some of the major metropolitan areas. And that unlicensed spectrum is also used in toll tags and a number of other areas. So what you see in unlicensed spectrum is because it's wide open, you have a lot of innovation and you have a lower cost of equipment and a lower cost for deployment of equipment on that spectrum because it has a larger market, I guess, for a better way to put it. And the actual value of that market is somewhere between $17 and $37 billion today. And that's not even projecting the $25 billion savings for cellular offloading onto Wi-Fi networks and those types of things. So unlicensed is extremely critical for this country's infrastructure. And when I mention the importance of it, it's not at the exclusion of licensed spectrum. You need that too. But we have to bear in mind that auctioning off every piece of spectrum or making everything licensed is going to shoot us in the foot, because we absolutely need unlicensed spectrum available in this country for the innovation that we've seen, particularly for rural parts of the country.
Good. All right. Now, Well, I'm going to do the same thing with this panel I did with the last one. We've covered a lot of ground here. Does anybody want to offer any comments or thoughts on things we didn't cover? Jeff?
Thing that was mentioned earlier, we're really excited about the E-rate initiative and what's going on in here in Arkansas and what Commissioner Rosenworcel has done with her discussion around E-rate 2.0. I think that's a tremendous opportunity for all the companies here to work with the educators in Arkansas across the country to really take full advantage of the opportunity to connect these students to faster bandwidth to improve the education system around the country. So we're excited about it, anxious to do whatever we can, and I appreciate the leadership of the Commissioner and you, Senator Pryor, on this important initiative.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Well, you guys have been great. Again, we're covering so much ground here. On any one of these topics, you could drill down and spend an hour or more just talking about the one thing. But I think what we were saying before is that Arkansas really is a good microcosm of what's going on out there, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and the various players in the market here. There's just it's just a great case study in and where we are with telecommunications. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a few-minute break between this panel